I grew up in a Mormon household. It was all about serving God and fighting the devil. And while I was an obedient daughter, my sister was not. She would scream and punch my mom, often until she had bruises all over her body. Finally, my dad had enough and locked my sister into a room without food, water, or toilet. He screamed, "You are allowed to come out once you apologize to your mother." But instead of apologizing, she did something truly evil. When I went into our garden the next morning, I found a cross standing on the grass with the name Charlie written on it. Charlie was our dog's name. Did something happen to him? I started panicking and screamed so loud that my dad came down. When he saw the cross, he whispered, "Your sister did this. She is possessed." We were both petrified, but still went to her room. The whole door lock was ripped out, but who could be strong enough to do that? My dad cautiously pushed the door open, and there she was, standing still, facing the wall. My dad said, "What have you done to our dog?" She slowly turned around and said, "I apologize." My blood froze. There was no life in her eyes. She wasn't human anymore. The next day, my sister was in the living room when she suddenly fell to the ground and started shaking rapidly and uncontrollably. My dad screamed, "She's possessed by a demon!" And then he put her on a chair and tied her up with tape. We were both terrified, and I could even hear my dad whisper, "We should burn her." But instead, he built a small wooden cabin in our garden and told my sister that it was her new home. It was the first time I'd seen my sister looking scared. But then she turned to me and said, You set me up. You killed the dog." I responded, "What? That's not true." And she said, "You will regret this badly." I probably should have gotten a knife or pepper spray to be able to defend myself, because when I got home from school the following week, my sister was waiting for me at the front door. She took me by my hair and said, "If you resist, I will only hurt you more." Then she dragged me into the forest next to our house. I knew I was gonna die, but I was too scared to fight her. After a while, she laid me down on the ground, and I saw reversed pentagrams carved into the trees around us. It was the symbol of the devil, and now I knew for sure that my sister was serving the devil. She pulled out some mushrooms and told me to eat them, but I thought they were poisonous, so I said, "No, please don't." She quickly got impatient and forced me to swallow them. At first, nothing happened, but after 20 minutes, everything changed. The trees around me started moving and my hands formed into claws. Faces of demons appeared all around me, and I thought I was trapped in hell. After hours of insanity, I finally heard a voice. It was my sister, and she screamed, "There she is! I told you she's been worshipping the devil!" I pulled my head up and saw my sister's and Dad's body, but they had the faces of demons, and one was even holding an axe. I crawled back, trying to escape, but one of them picked me up and brought me somewhere. It took me hours to get back to normal, but when I woke up, I was tied to a chair. My dad sat next to me and said, "What have you done to my daughter?" I responded, "What do you mean, Dad? It's me. I'm your daughter." He said, "How do I know?" And I responded, "My sister brought me into the forest and forced me to eat mushrooms. Afterward, everything turned into a nightmare. Trust me, I'm not a demon, but I saw her demon. It's living right under her face. It's evil and serves the devil." I guess I was lucky that my dad believed me, but this time he had enough of my sister. He told her to leave and never come back. It was hard to see my sister getting kicked out. She was just a teenager and had nowhere to go. But luckily, I saw her the next day in school. And during recess, she even pulled me into the bathroom, gave me a slap, and stole all my money. The next day, our neighbors came to our house and said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that your daughter is now living at my place. She told me that you guys have kicked her out, and I think that teenagers shouldn't be living on the streets." My dad didn't say anything, but both of us were scared. Because my sister was living so close to us, she could come over any time to hurt us. But that never happened. I almost forgot about her until I saw that her belly had gotten bigger. She was pregnant. But pregnant by whom? I hoped it wasn't our neighbor. He was already in his 60s, and I grew so worried that I told my dad about it. But he only responded, "Your sister has turned away from her faith. Now God is punishing her." Wow, my dad truly didn't care about his own daughter anymore. So the next day of school, I went over to my sister and said, "Hey, can I ask who's the father?" She turned around, came close and said, "That's none of your business, sister." Then she pushed me so hard that I fell to the ground. But I wasn't mad at her. I started to wonder if we had made a mistake by abandoning her. I mean, now that I was older, I knew that demons didn't exist. One day, I even told my dad that I didn't believe in God anymore. Of course, he completely freaked out and accused me of all kinds of crazy things, saying I was serving the devil and stuff. And when I didn't back down, he gave me a 30-day period to move out. But by now I was already 18 and about to finish high school, so I took a loan, applied for college, and moved into my own place. It was nice, and I felt so free. But I couldn't forget about my sister and her baby. That's why I went to her and asked, "Do you want to move in with me?" She looked terrible, like she had been through hell. But to my surprise, she said, "Yes." I naively thought everything would be great. But my sister treated her daughter terribly. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, she had killed our dog, but I still couldn't believe how mean she was to her baby. She often went a few inches close to her face and screamed, "Be quiet!" while also pinching her. It was really scary. I mean, who would do that to a baby? So I told her to stop it and treat her better. But she freaked out and screamed, "My daughter has it 1,000 times better than I did. She can be grateful I won't lock her into a small wooden cabin like my parents did to me." Maybe she was right. Maybe my family had treated her cruelly. But that was still no excuse to treat her own daughter the same way. That's why I gathered evidence of her mistreating her daughter and showed it to Child Protection Services. They agreed that my sister's parenting wasn't acceptable and took her daughter away. And because I didn't want my niece to grow up in a children's home, I'm taking care of her now. It's not easy being a mother while also going to college. But I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for her.
Hey, I'm Quentin, and this story starts in 7th grade when I insulted one of my classmates. I won't tell you the word I used, but it was a very bad word. And unfortunately, my teacher, Mr. Pesnick, was listening and gave me detention. I told him I was sorry, but I couldn't help it because I had Tourette's syndrome. I just watched that South Park episode where Cartman pretends to have Tourette's and insults everyone, and I figured it might get me out of detention. Well, Mr. Pesnick had never heard of Tourette's, so I had to explain that people with the syndrome can't always control what they say, so they sometimes say bad words at inappropriate moments. Of course he didn't believe I actually had Tourette's, but I skipped detention anyway, which is why he called up my parents. My dad picked up and I love my dad. He's the coolest guy in the world. And when Mr. Pesnick told him I'd claimed to suffer from Tourette's, my dad immediately said, "Oh, yeah, he does. We just got the diagnosis, and apparently he has a very strong form of the syndrome." His mom and I were devastated when we heard the news. It's really tragic. Suddenly, I had the freedom to say whatever I wanted, and I was going to make the most of it. When I walked into class the next morning, I saw Mr. Pesnick, I looked straight at him, and said a very unpleasant word. My classmates were shocked, and Mr. Pesnick went crazy. He said, "We're going to the principal now, and you're going to be expelled." But I just shrugged and said, "I have Tourette's syndrome, and if you expel me, my dad will sue you for discrimination of a mentally disabled person." Mr. Pesnick was speechless, because he knew I had the upper hand, and if he said one thing wrong, he might actually lose his job for mistreating me. For the next few weeks, I had fun insulting Mr. Pesnick, and at one point, he suggested that I should go to a special needs school, but I told him I'd rather continue to be one of his students. However, after a while, I got bored of screaming insults during class, and I stopped doing it. Of course, I had to make up an excuse, so I told my teachers I was finally on medication for my Tourette's. Looking back, I feel bad for faking my condition, because there are real people suffering from it. It was extremely immature. I lied about having a disorder just so I could get away with calling my teacher names. I've made a fool out of Mr. Pesnick and caused him a great deal of stress. If you've ever bullied someone like this, I want you to know it's not cool and it's not clever. I enjoyed the power I had over my teacher, but if everyone behaved like me, there would be a lot of jerks walking around. That's why I stopped doing it. And as soon as I graduate, I'll come clean and apologize to Mr. Pesnick, because what I was doing was inexcusable. I just hope he will accept my apology. Thank you for listening to my story, and please subscribe to this channel.